Why, hello, seventh block. Well, I'm now going to do the last segment of your reading homework. So just a review of your the second segment. Something you want to pick up on is that if you just remember page 31, there was a prisoner who didn't have to work as hard, but in exchange for not having to work as hard, he ended up like snitching on his fellow prisoners and his fellow prison mates. So just FYI there, that's just something that went on during those camps. Okay, page 33. Right at this moment, that scavenger Futukov latched onto them and stood right in front of Caesar and stared with burning eyes at his mouth. Shukov didn't have a shred of tobacco left and saw no chance of getting any today before the evening. He was tense all over from waiting, and right now he thought he'd rather have this butt than his freedom. But he wouldn't stoop as low as Futukov and look straight at the guy's mouth. Caesar was a mixture of all races. Whether he was a Greek, a Jew, or a gypsy, you just couldn't tell. He was still young. He'd been a cameraman for the movies, but they put him inside before he'd finished shooting his first film. He had a big, black, bushy mustache. They hadn't shaved it off here because this was how much he looked on the photo in his records. Caesar Markovich, Futukov drooled at him. He couldn't stand it any longer. Please, give me one little drag. He wanted it so badly that his face was twitching all over. Caesar's eyebrows went up a little. They were half lowered over his black eyes, and he looked at Futukov. The reason he had started smoking a pipe was so that people wouldn't bother him and catch butts from him. It wasn't that he grudged from the tobacco, but he didn't like having his thoughts interrupted. He smoked to help his mind come up with great ideas, but all he needed was to light a cigarette, and right away he could see that look in people's eyes. Leave a bit for me. Caesar turned to Shukov and said, Here you are, Ivan Denisovich. He twisted the burning butt out of the short amber holder with his thumb. Shukov jumped, even though he thought Caesar would give it to him of his own accord. He took it with one hand, quickly and thankfully, and put his other hand underneath to guard against dropping it. He wasn't hurt because Caesar was squeamish about letting him smoke it in the holder. Some people have clean mouths, others have foul mouths. But it didn't hurt his hardened fingers when the butt burned right down to them. The great thing was that he had beaten that scavenger Futukov to it, and here he was now smoking away till it burned his lips. Okay, so in case you haven't picked up, Futukov is not very well liked. He pretty much bums off of people a lot. Okay, so I think something you want to pick up on is Futukov is not very well liked among the prison mates because he's kind of a bum, you know? He uses people and he tries to get what he can from others. All right, let's keep going. The smoke seemed to go all through his hungry body and into his feet and his head. Just as this wonderful feeling spread all through him, Ivan Denisovich heard a roar from the men. They're taking our undershirts away! That's life in camp. Shukov had gotten used to it. Give them half a chance if you didn't watch out, they'd be at your throat. Why shirts? They'd been issued by the commandant himself. No, something was wrong. There were only 2 gangs ahead of them before the Friskers, and everyone in Gang 104 spotted Lieutenant Volkovo, the disciplinary officer. He'd come over from HQ and shouted something to the warders, and the warders who'd been taking it easy now really got busy and went for the men like wild animals. Their boss yelled, "Open your shirts!" They said even the commandant was scared of Volkovo, let alone the prisoners and warders. Not for nothing was he called Volkovo, and he always looked at you like a wolf. He was dark and tall and scowling and always dashing around. He'd come at you from behind the corner of the barracks, shouting, "What's going on here?" You couldn't keep out of his way. In the early days, he carried a whip of braided leather as long as his arm. They said he beat people with it, and he'd sneak up behind someone during the evening roll call and let him have it in the neck with his whip. "Get back into your line, you scum." Everyone would back away from him. The fellow he had whipped would take hold of his neck and wipe off the blood and keep his traps shut as not to get shoved in the cooler on top of it. Now, for some reason or other, he'd stopped going around with the whip. When it was freezing, the frisking routine was not so tough in the morning, though it was in the evening. The prisoners undid their coats and held them open. They marched up the fives, and 5 warders were waiting for them. They put their hands inside the prisoners' coats and felt their jackets. They patted the pocket, the only one allowed, on the right knee. They had gloves on, and if they felt something odd, they didn't yank it out right away, but asked, taking their time, "What do you have there?" What did they hope to find on a prisoner in the morning? Knives? But knives don't get taken out of the camp. They get brought in. What they had to watch out for in the mornings was people carrying a lot of food to escape with. There was a time when they were so worried about bread, a 6-ounce ration for the noon meal, that an order was issued for every gang to make itself a wooden box and put everyone's bread together in it. It was anybody's guess why they thought this would help. Most likely, the idea was to make things even tougher for people and to add to their troubles. You took a bite out of it to put your mark on it and threw it in the box. But all these hunks looked alike anyway. It was all the same bread. Then all the way you worried yourself sick about not getting your own piece back. And sometimes you got into a fight with people over it. Then, one day, 3 fellows escaped from the building site in a truck and took one of these boxes with them. So the bosses had all the boxes chopped up in the guard room, and then they went back to the old system. In the mornings, they also had to look out for anyone with civilian clothes under his camp uniform. They had long ago taken away these clothes, and they said you'd get them back when your sentence was up. But nobody had ever been let out of this camp yet. And another thing they checked for, letters. You might try and slip to someone on the outside to mail. They searched everybody for letters, they'd still be at it by noon. But Volkovo shouted to the warders to give them a real going over, and the warders quickly removed their gloves and told the men to open their jackets, where each man had taken a little of the warmth from his barracks and undo their shirts. Then they began to feel around to see whether extra clothes had been put on against regulations. Each prisoner was allowed a shirt and a vest, and anything extra had to come off. That was Volkovo's order passed down through the ranks of the prisoners. The gangs that had gone ahead were lucky. Some of them had already been checked out through the gates, but the rest had to open up. Anyone with extra clothing on had to strip it off right there in the freezing cold. So guys, just a reminder, do your sticky note summaries every 2 pages, and again, keep track of the details regarding the prison conditions as well as the people. The warders got busy, but then they had trouble. The gates were clear now, and the guards were yelling, "Come on, come on!" So 104 got a break from Volkovo. He told them to report if they had anything extra and hand it to the stores that evening, with a note explaining how and why they had hidden it. Everything on Shukov was a regular issue. Let them look, he had nothing to hide. But they caught Caesar with a woolen shirt, and the captain was some kind of jersey. The captain kicked up a fuss just like he used to on a ship. He'd only been there 3 months. "You've got no right to strip people in the cold. You don't know Article 9 of the Criminal Code. They have the right, and they knew the article. You've still got a lot to learn, brother. You're not Soviet people," the captain kept on at them. "You're not communists." Volkovo could take the stuff about the criminal code, but this made him mad. He looked black as a thundercloud and snapped at him. 10 days solitary. And a bit quieter, he said to the chief warder, "You can see to that in the evening." They didn't like putting people in solitary in the morning because it meant losing a day's work. So let him break his back all day and shove him in the cells at night. The punishment block was nearby on the left of the perimeter, a stone building with 2 wings. They had finished building the second wing this autumn. One wasn't enough. The prison had 18 blocks divided into small solitary cells. The rest of the camp was made of wood. Only the prison was stone. The cold had gotten under their shirts. There was no getting rid of it now. They had just wasted their time wrapping themselves up. And Shukov's back ached enough as it was. If only he could lie down in a hospital bed right now and sleep. That was all he wanted, with a nice heavy blanket. The prisoners were standing in front of the gate, buttoning and tying their coats, and the guards were waiting for them outside. "Come on, come on!" And a work controller was shoving them in the back. "Come on, come on!" First, there was one gate just at the perimeter, then a second gate, and there were railings on both sides. "Stop!" yelled one of the guards. "Just like a bunch of sheep, line up by 5s. Now it was getting light. On the other side of the guardhouse, the escort's fire was almost out. They always lit a fire before roll call to keep warm and to get some light for the count. A guard was counting in a loud, harsh voice. 1, 2, 3. The men peeled off by 5s and filed through. Girls. So whichever way you looked at them, from front or behind, you could see 5 heads, 5 backs, and 10 legs. A second guard, whose job it was to check the count, stood by the railings without speaking and just made sure the number was right. The lieutenant stood still and watched. He had come outside to double-check the count. That was the routine when they left the camp. The men meant more to a guard than gold. If there was one man missing on the other side of the wire, he'd soon be taking his place. The gang formed up again. Now it was the sergeant who did the counting. 1, 2, 3. Again, groups of 5 men peeled off and marched in separate ranks. The second in command of the escort checked them in on the other side. Then there was another lieutenant. He was double-checking for the escort. They couldn't afford to make a mistake. If they signed for one too many, they'd also had it. There were escorts all over the place. They ringed the column, going to the power station, shouldered their Tommy guns, and pointed them straight at your face. And there were fellows with dogs. One of the dogs was baring his teeth like he was laughing at the prisoners. All right, 7th block, that's the end of your reading homework. Again, make sure you have a sticky note summary every 2 pages. Again, keep track of characters and prison conditions. God bless you and have a great day.